All right, we're going to do a little rundown of these articles for the annotated bibliography and for the literature review. The way I laid them out, the way I thought of them when I created the course, is that the Salisbury piece from 1992 is really a kind of literature review. It's looking at Jesuit scholarship for the last couple decades, and then it also New England scholarship for the last couple decades, and compares the two approaches. And he's asking questions. He's sort of saying, scholars, we've thought about it this way, but we should really maybe think about it in a different way. Primarily, he says that New England was interested in converting, they just weren't terribly good at it. And then he says that New France, while we think about the Jesuits as willing to accommodate to Indian viewpoints, really once they had the converts, they were strict and incredibly demanding on what they wanted their converts to do. So what he's saying is we need to change the way we think about Jesuits. They were more harsh than we encountered, and then we need to change the way we think about Puritans because they were more interested in conversion than we probably given them credit for in the past. 1992 is when this piece comes out, and Salisbury is a serious heavyweight in Native American scholarship. He's written a number of really important books. Okay, going on. The other one we looked at, sorry about this, I'm going to go back to the beginning, is Bruce Trigger's article from 1965. He is, as many of you noted in the annotated bibliography, he's responding to a couple earlier authors writing about the Jesuits. And all of these authors are responding to one another. If you look in the footnotes, they cite each other's sources. Trigger appears in every article we read for this, right? Rhonda shows up a bunch. Anyway, so Trigger is writing in 65. He's really pretty early on. He's one of the few people to first start taking Indians seriously as historical actors. He's one of the first to start taking the Jesuits seriously as historical actors. And the main thing he's fighting against is this view of the Jesuits that they were out for money or they were out for something other than Indian souls and Indian salvation. He basically says, no, indeed they were, but then he also brings up the negative sides of all of that. Disease and the alcohol trade and some of those things. So Trigger, you should read Trigger as a very early entry. And also, one thing, look at this. It's written on a freaking typewriter. It's underlined. We don't underline titles anymore. Now we make them into italics because it's prettier and we have word processing. But this thing's so darn old, it's written on a typewriter. All right. Trigger, by the way, is dead now also. Then we have James Rhonda writing in 1972, Jesuit Civilization Planning in New France. Rhonda turns out to be a serious heavy hitter in the world of history. He wrote a really important book about Lewis and Clark among the Indians, and he has some other really important early Jesuit stuff. You'll see his name show up in almost everybody's footnotes. One thing I'd say about Rhonda in this is he looks at the Jesuits in a larger context. So he looks at other Jesuit activities in China, in Central and South America. And so he really brings a broader view, and he talks about this civilization planning and how the Jesuits were a militant order out to change the world. So really look at that for Rhonda because that's an important aspect of his, the comparative to other Jesuits. And then also the way he looks back to Europe. All right, moving on. 85, we have Daniel Richter. Now, here's another guy publishing in ethnohistory, another scholar who, this is early in his career, but he becomes a really important Native American scholar. He's looking at the Jesuits, but he says, let's look at Iroquois versus Iroquois. Everybody else has been kind of focusing on the Huron. Him, writing a decade later, says, well, let's go to the Jesuit relations, which is sources that everybody looked at, these massive multi-year sets of correspondence and other documents written by the Jesuits. Everybody uses those sources, but Richter, he's one of the first guys to say, let's look at these sources and see what the Iroquois experienced with Jesuits. And it's fascinating, isn't it? How they use, the headmen use them for their own gains. And I think you see that pretty strongly in Black Robe, that the individual tribal leaders had reasons to keep the Jesuits around that were different, than what the Jesuits wanted and different than what Champlain wanted. So that's some nice stuff in the Richter piece. Okay, moving on. The last one is from 1998. It's the Catholic Historical Review, and it's Goddard. Goddard, following up on Rhonda's lead from the 70s, he also looks at Europe. He looks at the ways the Jesuits viewed European peasants and the ways that they viewed the Montagnes, which were a tribal group sort of north of the St. Lawrence River, and they were seen as more wild, right? More savage because they didn't have settled villages, which is why the Jesuits didn't focus on them. They focused on the Hurons. So this guy, writing in 1998, stretches that boundary even more. He goes, first we start off with Trigger looking at the Hurons. Rhonda kind of follows up with the Hurons. Then we have Richter looking at the Iroquois. And now finally Goddard is looking at the Montagnes. And also bringing in that European reference. And I think it was really telling in the black robe scene where our young priest meets the disfigured priest back in Europe. You know, the half of his face is cut off. And he very clearly makes the connection, the half cut off face priest makes the connection to Europe. So that's another way to think about the Jesuits, is that they're very much they're fighting this larger global struggle that has references in Europe, it has references in Central and South America and China and in New France. And that's a powerful way to think about the Jesuit experience, not simply as something that's occurring amongst the Huron and the Iroquois and other native tribes in Canada, but as a broader worldwide phenomenon. Okay, I wanted to get through that. Hopefully some of you will watch this, and hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. Think about these authors as building on one another. Think about how they bring in different sources other than the Jesuit relations, and then ultimately think about the Jesuits. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they reflective of a broader French imperial vision? Are they, I don't know. Figure out what you want to say about the Jesuits and write me a stunning literature review. Come see me during office hours if you want. Otherwise, have fun out there in Cyberville.